All right, so today we're back with my friend Evangelos Simoudis of Synapse Partners, and his blog is at corporateinnovation.co. We are recording this on the morning of October 24th, 2025. And as always, go to the episode notes for links for the resources we're going to cite in this conversation. And please hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All right. Topic number one, which is all over the news. There's a bubble around AI. Let's just assert that confidently. So for you, Evangelist, obviously there's all sorts of warning flags. So to you, which one stands out?
Well, from an investor, as an investor, I would say what stands out is where valuations are heading. And when I say valuations, as a multiple of revenue, right? So we're seeing multiples that we have not seen since literally the 99, 2000 timeframe. And this is different. And we're also seeing ideas and proposals for funding that are, I would call them euphemistically, flimsy. And that is a problem. I mean, I don't want to remind people of what was happening in 99 on the first internet wave.
By the way, Evangelos, so going back to 99, and I was here at the tail end of 99, right? So, and I don't, I was just a low level startup employee at that point, so I didn't have a big macro picture. But I think one thing that is interesting right now is there's a bubble in AI, but the other parts of VC, the companies are having a hard time raising, right?
That is true.
Other topics, other areas like maybe biotech or whatever. So in the 1990s bubble around internet, was the same thing happening? In other words, people were only investing in dot-coms?
Well, there are a few similarities and there are obviously certain differences. There were not as many funds at that time as we have today. Yeah. So there weren't as many entities asking for money, and particularly very young funds. We didn't have that. We have an equal interest by corporations to invest, but we didn't. I don't remember. I should say, just to be precise, I don't remember having.
What about this kind of? Was there lack of interest in other things other than internet?
Well, I would say that again in the venture world, the communications, telecommunications, right,
and but that was internet. That was perceived as internet.
Well, I mean, there was internet was both consumer applications and some enterprise applications, and then a lot of infrastructure.
And then telco, right?
Yeah, a lot of infrastructure. So we did have that concentration of
similar concentration.
Similar concentration. Now, I would like to make one comment though, which, and I've been thinking a lot about this, which is when we were facing the internet bubble, we didn't have a precedent internet bubble. So we were calling it a bubble. And we were thinking about other bubbles through history, so tulip mania and whatever way.
But also, don't you think that was a? It was the signs there were so much clearer because companies were going public, and it was clearly insane, right?
Well, companies were going public. Now, in this case, we have companies being acquired for insane valuations, right? I mean,
right. But there was clear participation of the retail investor.
There was, and even now, I think we're seeing a lot of people who don't really understand the technology or didn't even understand venture becoming angel investors and want to participate in the funding. But I did want to make one other comment. To me, there's a big difference between what we faced back in the early 2000 with the so-called internet bubble and what we have today with AI, because this is not the first time that AI excites the world, in a sense, right? So we should be thinking about what happened in the past and how it ended, and compare it to what is happening now. And I think that could give us hopefully a more educated way of approaching what could happen, right? Um, Compare, say, to what we were facing with the internet bubble in the 2000 2001 time frame.
All right.
Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next topic, but one last comment on the bubble. To me, kind of one of the most glaring signals, of course, is this whole circular financing, right? So where companies are
Exactly.
investing in each other. Because to me, if there's really so much demand for NVIDIA chips, why is NVIDIA investing in their customers?
Exactly.
If there's so much demand, why do I have to prop up my customers, right? So.
Exactly. There are some very interesting relations that are being established this time around that I think both the venture investor, but also the average investor who gets excited about this should pay attention to, as well as, by the way, what is happening in the S&P, where you have the so-called Magnificent Seven driving so much of the growth. I mean, you're seeing companies that are, there isn't a nice distribution to explain the rise particularly in the S&P.
All right. So next topic is enterprise adoption. Given that Evangelos has just did a swing through the East Coast, so he will give his more bearish take, and I will try to counter him with my more bullish take.
Okay. So actually, I shouldn't call it bearish take. I will just building upon what we were saying before. What I'm seeing is a lot of enterprises getting into AI just because they want to test the technology and they get excited about the technology. And that entry into experimenting with AI is typically driven either by board pressure without really understanding implications. The second one, I will call it the shadow AI, where there's a lot of employees that are already using, sometimes in their private lives, AI tools, and then they move
So
them into
so what you're saying is this could be happening even in the absence of, let's say I'm Citibank, right? So, and then what you're saying is happening even in the absence of me hearing something concrete that, hey, JP Morgan is actually doing something concrete and they have something successful. So even in the absence of that fear, they're going on their own.
Well, yes, and I think that, again, the point I'm trying to make is that what I'm observing is that a lot of enterprises, and again, you always have leaders for adopting a new technology. We've seen it with cloud. We've seen it with many other technologies through the years.
Every vertical has a leader, right? So.
But that doesn't mean that each of these enterprises that are starting to experiment, they really articulate a good reason for using AI. And what I'm not seeing is the use cases that say, if we're going to apply AI here, we're going to address this problem, and this is how we're going to measure our the improvement in our performance because we're using AI. And then you can go down in the technology and say, okay, here's the type of AI that I'm going to use, and here's the kind of data that I need, and I have this type of data within my corporation, but I need to supplement it with data that I will get from outside.
So
that kind of rationale, well, I'm saying that type of rationale, I don't see it in as many enterprises as I should be seeing it, given the excitement about AI.
So what distinguishes the ones that I'm assuming you've talked to ones that have done well,
Yes.
right? So what distinguishes them? I mean,
Yeah. I'll tell you.
given what you laid out, so let's get more specific. Is it because I don't know? So I'm just spitballing here. Is it because they have a AI center of excellence?
No, actually, I
Or,
think that
yeah. So what is the first thing that they do that propels them forward?
um, I call it the use case matrix. They are able to, throughout the organization, right, throughout the enterprise and its various organizations, they are able to identify use cases for which there is a clear opportunity to show improvement. They are able to articulate how they're going to measure that
So
improvement.
this is a centralized team.
Now we'll go to this. In order for this to happen, you need to bring together technology, business unit, HR, CFO, right? And I think that the barriers need to break there in order to make this appropriate. And that to me, and that brings me to another point, which is if I look throughout, let's say even throughout the 21st century, when we have technologies like e-commerce, like SaaS, and a few others, each of these fundamental enterprise technologies were accompanied by transformation. So when I talk about bringing together these different organizations, that implies organizational transformation. That does not imply just having a technology group saying, hey, we are the AI experts, therefore we need to have the mantle for AI and carry it forward, right? And most corporations that I'm seeing today think of it as just a technology application rather than as an opportunity to transform. And transformation also implies business process transformation, implies organizational transformation, which then starts seeping into culture transformation. I think that the leaders, whether regardless of the industry, the leaders are doing this. The followers or the ones that want to say, well, we're doing AI as well, they typically think of it just as a technology application, whether it is motivated by one or more vendors, whether it is motivated by some technology group within the corporation, but it doesn't start from the point that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I think actually I'm hearing that even from out here in the startup world, because the companies that I talk to are the startups who are selling to enterprise, and they also come to the conclusion that in many places that they end up trying to sell into, the barrier is really organizational. That's what prevents the companies from succeeding, so to speak, right? So
Right.
they have they have the talent to implement many of these things. It's just that they don't have a playbook or the discipline to do it systematically, right?
Right. And I will tell you one other thing, since you mentioned startups, since we have them in our portfolio as well, because one of the rationales that investors use when they give a high valuation to a startup, to a private company, they will say, well, it will grow into it. And growing into it means that you need to go and get the revenue to show that the multiple between what you paid and the revenue is not as high as it most of the times is. And in order to do that, there is a tremendous pressure to sell, even if there is not a very good use case for absorbing what you're selling, right? And that's why I think we're going to start seeing experiment failures. I mean, I don't want to cite again that report from MIT that says 95%, because I have certain problems with that report.
Yeah.
But I think we can, on the other hand, we should not ignore that report, because it does give us an interesting signal to say that we need to pay more attention on how we go from initial intent to adopt and apply AI technologies to actually applying them successfully, so that we can see, again, from my perspective, there are really three objectives or three end results. It can be productivity improvement, it can be cost reduction, and it can be new revenue generation. So any of the cases, the use cases that an organization defines needs to fall within this one of these three categories, sometimes maybe more than one. But if you cannot connect to that and go and say to your CFO or to your CEO, here's what we're going to do. Like I was talking to a company in New York, one of our customers. They were saying, well, tell me if I'm going to apply this, how many people am I going to let go, or am I going to be able to take on more clients, right? And so that, again, to me is an example of how organizations need to be thinking about when they apply AI.
Yeah. I think, I mean, in many ways, I think this is a technology, as you point out, right? So the ROI is obviously one measure of success, but capability expansion is also a measure of success, right? So you go from,
Right.
let's say, having a customer support team that can support 100 calls an hour to 2,000 calls an hour, right? So
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
So and also they might be able to expand their hours, right? So suddenly you go 24/7 coverage, right?
Well, exactly. And on the flip side of that, how does the customer of that company, right, who is the company that is adopting, that is applying AI, how does the customer see that? Do they see it in a better? Do they get a better experience? Do they get lower cost per turn, whatever the term, per product that they acquire? How does the customer see that improvement that AI will give you? And this again goes back to what I was saying. You need to select the right use case and connect it with the right metrics, and then decide what transformations this adoption, this decision will imply.
By the way, the funny thing about this conversation is this is a conversation we always have with any new technology. I mean,
Exactly.
it's exactly the same conversation around the big data technologies, right?
Exactly. And that's why I said before that if you look just in the 21st century of the technologies that were targeting the enterprise, cloud computing, e-commerce, social commerce, they all imply the transformation. And the companies that were that undertook
or remember big data, there were a lot of abandoned projects there too, right?
Exactly. And the companies that undertook to both transform and adopt the technology, they were the most successful. The ones that just saw it as, okay, we'll apply this technology because that's what we read in the newspaper, or this is what our competitor is doing, they typically didn't end up being successful.
All right. So to round out this conversation, topic 3, China, a topic that is something I follow closely, having organized conferences and chaired conferences in China over many years. And so I'm, pretty still plugged into that ecosystem. But Evangelos wanted to discuss China. So go. Yeah.
Well, what I wanted to say is that, again, because of my recent travels, both East Coast and further inland, I'm not seeing a balanced perception of where the competition between U.S. and China is. I think we have
this is from mainly people in big companies.
Yes.
Okay.
There is so my headline is that, especially for the technologies that you and I are talking about, what broadly is classified as deep tech, I think there is AI or whatever. I think there's a perception that the U.S. is much farther along, much farther ahead than China, than the reality really depicts.
So I know for a fact that you talk to a lot of people in the car industry, right? So in the car industry, obviously this is not their opinion, right? So
well, in the car industry, you have to think about what you mean by the car industry. If you're talking about battery electric vehicles, I think throughout the U.S. there is a recognition that
we're far behind.
China is way ahead in battery technology. But there's another aspect of the car industry, which is the manufacturing aspect. And when we talk about adaptive robots, including humanoid robots, there's a perception that the US is ahead. And I will call this at best a contested statement, right? I mean, because
they themselves, the people inside this industry, are the ones voicing this assessment.
They are, I mean, they're looking at certain, I mean, you hear comments by Musk about where Optimus is, and you hear comments by companies
he's got to justify his share price.
Yeah, exactly. You hear comments from other companies in Europe and in the US, and again, I'm not
pure numerically speaking. I think the China is ahead even in the robots in factories, right? So,
well, again, I am separating numerically controlled robots, which they're in abundance even in U.S. factories. But again, China has made manufacturing a big deal, and they have won there over the years. But now there is definitely an effort to re-industrialize, if you will, the U.S. We're making, the administration is making big steps to bring in more manufacturing capability. And that manufacturing capability will have to adopt adaptive robotics, right? Which are highly intelligent. They use all sorts of the new types of models that are emerging out of the labs. And what I'm trying to say is that in areas like this, or in areas like large language models and large action models and everything else that goes in this territory, we should not be as dismissive of China as we appear to be. I mean, we tend to think.
But this is an interesting take, because basically the people here working on foundation models don't have this stake.
No, they don't. And that's why
don't these people talk to people out here?
Well, I mean, there is again. You talk about AI bubble, and you have to if you're going to justify certain things, you tend to emphasize.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Capability.
When people out here do talk to the media, they tend to maybe amplify their lead.
Right. I mean,
but then when you talk to them in private, obviously that's a different thing, right? So.
Well, look, I'll give you. I mean, this is a well talked about example, but think about how surprised we were with DeepSeek. Okay, I think we will be as surprised as news about the Chinese humanoid robots are starting to emerge. Right? I mean, right now,
DeepSeek, for people at least who were following China, was not that surprising.
Again, I'm not talking about the people who are following China very attentively.
Humanoid robots. We just both listened to Rodney Brooks. Humanoid robots is a dead end.
I don't think it's a dead end.
But no, not a dead end. But it's not as production ready as people think, right?
I think that, I mean, the way I say to at least our enterprise customers is that it is going to take longer to see it mass produced and deployed than the propaganda or the marketing material would have you believe. But again, my point is that in these technologies, whether it is adaptive robots, whether it is certain types of AI, whether it is certain areas of biotech, quantum computing, I think that there is much more parity than the general public may believe, and that I think should keep us in a state of continuous activity and investment. I think we need to determine whether that investment should be whether we should rely for that investment only on the private sector, as it has been happening to date, or whether the administration, the government, whether it is the U.S. administration, the European Union, will need to take much more of an industrial policy approach, which is in a sense borrowing some elements of how China is approaching some of these issues. Because again, there is a very significant difference between how U.S. and particularly U.S. and China, as the two superpowers, are approaching these deep tech areas.
Well, this is a subject of Dan Wang's book that we talked about previously, right?
Right.
But
right.
I think that the other area that I think that people should pay close attention to is semiconductors, right? So
yes, absolutely.
So
there I think
there's clearly a gap there, a big gap between the U.S. and China, but that's in the case of really cutting edge semiconductors. What's happening in China is they're just making what it's basically necessity is the mother of invention, right? So if your chips are slower than or compared to what we're using here, let's just say, I'm just throwing this out there. Let's say the leading chips in China are 3 years behind or 4 years behind. Whatever, they will make it work to train their models. Whatever it takes, they will use those chips to train their models, right? So,
and that will mean, by the way, that maybe they're slower in pushing out the latest and greatest model, but that again, as we're seeing even in the West,
you don't need the latest and greatest if you're
exactly.
an enterprise, right? So,
exactly. And this is the point that I want to get across here. That we need to be paying attention, not who is in the tip of the spear, but also what's happening just behind that, right? Because I think that has a much bigger impact to the economy than the tip of the spear.
By the way, did you see that after the conference, and Rodney was telling me this, he published a post about humanoid robots.
Oh, I didn't see that. No,
it's worth reading, and I will link to it in the episode notes, and I will send it to you, Evangelos. But basically, the gist of it is the following. Let me see. Yeah, so maybe the expectations are unrealistic because basically a lot of these humanoid robots are being taught dexterity mainly through videos of humans, but the sense of touch is going to be critical, and that's not something that is remotely close to.
Yeah, we had looked at a few companies maybe 3 or 4 years ago now that were coming out of research labs, and I mean founders were coming out of research lab, and they were focusing on the touch issue, which is very critical. For example, in warehousing applications, logistics applications, filling in boxes with heterogeneous items.
Yeah. So, and then Rodney ties it to other areas of deep learning and why it's going to be harder. But also, he says that what's going to end up happening is the people who are using the term humanoid robots, before you know it, will expand this to mean robots with wheels. So the category itself will become just a marketing.
Yeah. And that will not be, I mean, we've seen that happen in other places, so it will not be surprising.
Yeah. And with that, thank you, Evangelos. And again, go to the episode notes for links.